Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a journey far beyond the typical halls of power.
Far beyond.
We are plunging headfirst into the political magma flows of the Dragon Empire, a world brought to vivid, terrifying life in E.E. Knight's extraordinary fantasy saga.
It's a spectacular place to deep dive because, the sources offer a narrative told entirely from the perspective of the scaled rulers of the world. It's really unique.
Yeah, and critics and readers have praised the series for avoiding, the typical fantasy cliches.
Right. It doesn't just give us a warmed-over medieval setting. It gives us this intricate, highly stratified, almost alien society with complexities and characters that feel deeply human, despite their, monumental size and legal capabilities.
And our mission today is to unpack the sheer ambition and the devastating, spectacular implosion of this ancient power structure. We're tracking the fate of three pivotal siblings who really defined the end of an era.
That's the tier, RuGaard, also known as the Copper.
His diplomatic, politically adept sister, Wistala.
And the unscaled, isolationist moral compass of the family, AuRon the Grey.
So before we get into it, we have to establish the playing field.
We do. At the absolute core of this world lies the Lavadome. It's the secret, underground seat of power beneath the Imperial Rock, a place of great mystique and ancient technological secrets.
And guarding this engine of governance are the elite forces.
The aerial host and the specialized female combat unit, the Firemaids.
And crucially, above ground, you have the Grand Alliance. This is the transactional, often bitterly contested relationship with the various human provinces known collectively as Hypatia.
And the sources immediately lay bare a structure built not just on dragonfire, but on a knife-edge balance of favors, debts, ancient feuds, and a deeply unsettling amount of internal draconic ambition.
It's a world that is fundamentally unstable from the start.
That instability is exactly why we need to begin with the Copper. Tyr RuGaard. He's painted as a master strategist, a dragon who managed to unify vast territories, yet his rule is ultimately built upon a foundation of sand.
Or maybe a dangerously thin layer of cooling lava.
Exactly.
So let's unpack that foundation. His decision to launch a major, costly military campaign, the war against the Pirate Lords of Swayport, this wasn't initiated by a direct threat to the Lavadome or to draconic safety. It was fundamentally a political payment.
It was.
Walk us through the demands made by the allied Hypatian provinces.
Okay, so the sources make it really clear that the Hypatian provinces, which relied on the Grand Alliance for protection and trade security, they came to the Copper with what amounted to, nagging complaints.
Just nagging.
Pretty much. They claimed the Pirate Lords of Swayport were constantly molesting their shipping, interfering with vital fishing fleets, and generally destabilizing their coastal economy. RuGaard endured what the sources call weary hours of these complaints.
So what was his internal calculus? He's the supreme ruler. Why dedicate the irreplaceable lives of his dragons to solving what is basically a glorified human customs dispute?
It was pure realpolitik. The Copper understood the Grand Alliance not as a partnership of equals, but as a deeply cynical transactional arrangement.
Right.
The Hypatians paid tribute in trade, supplies, and technical knowledge, and in return, the dragons provided overwhelming force and security. To maintain that massive tributary relationship, he had to occasionally demonstrate his commitment.
Even if the task was beneath him.
Exactly. He viewed the Hypatians in a really telling quote, not as true allies, but as unusually quarrelsome thralls who needed discipline and protection. The Swayport campaign was just the necessary cost of doing business.
That distinction, allies versus quarrelsome thralls, that tells you everything you need to know about how he viewed human sovereignty. He controls them through superior power, but he has to spend his own resources to keep them quiet. And this cynical cost-benefit analysis did not go unnoticed by his own kind.
Far from it. This is where the political dissent really starts to emerge. We get that fantastic, vivid detail of young, freshly fledged dragons.
The ones who still had ideals.
Yeah, those who were not yet battle-hardened, singing a protest outside the Copper's private air gallery. And their song was blunt and accusatory. Dragons bleed for Hypatia's need.
That detail is brilliant because it just encapsulates the deep internal schism. The younger generation felt that their unique power was being wasted, their lives risked not for the glory of the Empire, but as collateral to secure the comfort and commerce of their human subordinates.
It was a war fought purely to service the Grand Alliance debt.
Which leads us directly into the bloody reality of a military execution. This was not a quick, decisive sweep.
No, the Swayport attack, far from being a simple demonstration of dragon dominance, was a brutally complex, layered military operation.
So let's dive into the specifics of the strategy. How did the Copper structure this assault, and what immediate challenges did his leadership face?
Well, first, the Copper's physical state immediately compromises him, though he turns it into a perverse strength. He leads the aerial host, positioned high above the inland ocean, despite flying with a painful, severely torn wing. The source notes he regrets not taking the necessary time for conditioning flights before the campaign. This detail shows that even the Tyr is fallible, subject to physical pain, and prone to the sort of leadership mistakes that come from overwork and hubris.
So he's flying compromised, but he still orchestrates a sophisticated plan. This wasn't just raw, independent power.
No. It was coordinated action across air, land, and sea. Absolutely. The main host provides aerial cover, but the ground assault involves the elite female combat unit, the Fire Maids.
And they're specialized.
They are specialized for coordination and ground logistics. They were responsible for transporting the Hypatian soldiers on flat-bottom river barges right up to the beachhead.
Which means dragons were acting as logistical support for humans?
Right, rather than just independent fighters, which is a huge deal.
But the pirates, they weren't just simple cutthroats hiding gold. The sources suggest they had advanced defensive technologies that made them a serious threat.
They had learned dragon fighting from the best. The dwarfs. The pirates had adapted dwarf technology, filling the towers overlooking Swayport Harbor with devastating war machines designed specifically to counter aerial attack.
So this wasn't medieval warfare. This was facing specialized anti-air weaponry.
Exactly. And the description of those aerial harpoons is absolutely stomach-turning. They are not just projectiles, they are designed for maximum biological devastation.
What does the text say?
They're described as horrible barbed things the length of a spear, full of spurs that went in easily but wouldn't come out without destruction to muscle, blood vessel, and organ.
Oh, that's just vile.
It's visceral.
Yeah.
The Copper himself reflects that he would much rather take an arrow directly through the eye and die at once than endure the drawn-out, agonizing death those harpoons inflicted. This comparison reveals the true lethality and psychological terror that the dragons faced.
They were exposed to tools specifically engineered to bypass their scales and immense strength.
And the cost of this campaign, run for the benefit of quarrelsome thralls, was paid immediately. We see the casualty of Fimisanath, a young Ankaline dragon.
What was the tactical error that cost him his life?
Fimisanath, likely fueled by youthful eagerness or the pressure to perform for his clan, broke formation. He swooped too low, too rashly, trying to strike at the gate, and exposed himself to the entrenched war machines.
Struck down instantly.
Instantly. It highlights the unforgiving nature of combat, where even a momentary lapse in discipline leads to a catastrophic end.
And this death leads into a profound, if grisly, look at draconic military ritual, especially concerning the relationship between dragon and thrall.
The ritual surrounding the fallen in foreign lands is crucial for understanding their culture. Commander Hebellerith, assessing the damage, judged that Fimisanath would never fly or even open his eyes again.
So it was a mercy killing.
Dictated by custom. His human rider, as was tradition, dispatched him with a quick spear thrust under the right side, which means the claw targeting the life center there. Then they opened his neck heart.
That immediate, formalized ending of life by the dragon's human partner. It just underscores the deeply intertwined and yet brutally pragmatic nature of the alliance.
It does. And despite the Copper noting that Fimisanath was young and foolish for breaking rank, he still pays him a signal honor. He acknowledges the courage, even in the recklessness.
What did he do?
He ordered that a golden storming stripe be painted onto the dead dragon's wing before the body was ceremonially burned. It was a gesture that acknowledged the young dragon's spirit and commitment, a display of Scott-like fury, even though he was Ankaline.
So it suggests that while strategy and discipline are paramount, the Copper still values raw courage.
Right. He needs those examples of bravery, even if they end fatally, to maintain morale.
It's a complex piece of leadership. Punish the rash behavior by letting him die, but reward the fury with a stripe. Let's step back and look at the larger command structure this war exposed. The Copper wondered if the pirates realized that dragons fighting under their own command were vastly different from those fighting under Rain and Ryder.
Yeah, that distinction is key.
What's the difference there?
The distinction reveals the degrees of draconic sovereignty within the military. A dragon fighting under its own command is leveraging its full intellect, unique power, and centuries of inherited instinct. A dragon under reign and rider is essentially a highly weaponized vehicle guided by a thrall.
And the pirates had only faced the second kind before.
The sources suggest that earlier attacks the pirates had faced used that latter, less effective, more predictable method. The Copper, by leading dragons fighting under their own command, brought a level of independent strategic thinking the pirates just hadn't anticipated.
And yet, the alliance still necessitated the use of human thralls for precision tasks.
Absolutely. The reliance on human riders for technical details underscores the core compromise of the Grand Alliance. Dragons are sheer, overwhelming power, but humans possess the precision and technical knowledge needed for specific military objectives.
Like seizing the war machines.
Exactly. The Copper noted the immense value of human thralls in seizing the war machines in the high towers, a mission that required landing, detailed architectural knowledge, and intricate timing that was perhaps beneath the dignity or outside the technical training of the dragons themselves.
It highlights a critical dependency, one which later becomes a massive vulnerability.
It does.
We mentioned earlier the Copper was leading this entire host while physically compromised, flying in pain. How does the text use this physical suffering to illustrate his leadership style?
It's an incredibly physical depiction of leadership. He is literally flying in blood and pain, regretting his lack of preparation. But the text frames this injury as something he actively weaponized.
Weaponizes how?
The source says the pain forced him into a foul mood, and that foul mood was necessary to fill his fire bladder and set it quivering, preparing him for battle. He channels his physical suffering, his trauma, into fuel for his aggression and his leadership.
That's a fascinating psychological detail. He's not just enduring the pain, he's leveraging it to fill the fire bladder, the very core of draconic power.
He is literally converting suffering into fire.
That tells us he is a character of immense self-control, driven by a determination that borders on the ascetic.
Exactly. He's a conqueror, but one who is internally vulnerable, yet capable of forging that vulnerability into a political tool.
Yeah.
The problem is that while he is focused on these external bloody conflicts to maintain the Grand Alliance, the rot is already setting in back home.
Which brings us down far below the battlefields of Swayport into the political underworld and cultural center of the Lavadome itself.
And that brings us to part 2, Lavadome society.
Let's descend.
The Lavadome is a heart of the empire, but it's a heart choked by factionalism. Dragon society is rigorously stratified by clan division, and these divisions fuel constant, dangerous political jealousy. The 3 major clans are the Scuttle, the Wire, and the Ankeline.
So for the listener, what are the primary distinctions and political functions of these 3 groups?
Okay, so it's a classic division of labor and power. The Scuttle are generally associated with physical strength, brawn, military dominance. They are the fiercest, often the most direct in their political methods.
The soldiers?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The Wire are the hardier, often used for messages, long-distance communication, and the vital administrative backbone that holds the empire together across vast distances. They are the logistical and messaging specialists.
And the Ankeline.
The Ankeline are the intellectual heart, often associated with brains, cunning, and scholarship. They are the architects of strategy, the keepers of ancient knowledge, and the primary source of the deep political intrigue that constantly bubbles beneath the surface of the imperial rock.
So the Copper, RuGaard, he has to constantly navigate the jealousies between these factions.
Constantly. The Scuttle might resent the Angeline's influence. The Wire might resent being relegated to just carrying messages. The powder keg.
Speaking of culture, let's talk about the practices that reinforce the differences between dragons and hominids. The consumption of dragon blood is a hugely important and, frankly, shocking custom.
It is fundamental, and it exists on multiple levels. Dragon blood is consumed ceremonially, usually mixed with wine, for toasts like the one given posthumously to Fimisanath. It's a marker of shared power and remembrance.
But on humans, the effects are something else entirely.
Profound and unpredictable. We see the intensity of this effect in the young replacement rider, Gundar, son of Gunfer.
Walk us through his reaction to drinking even a ceremonial drop.
The scene is almost hallucinatory. When Gundar drinks it, the reaction is immediate and violent. Red overflow runs out the side of his mouth, and then his almost hairless face suddenly had a new beard and a mustache.
Wow.
The transformation is physically shocking. Then he drops into a wild kicking dance, spinning like a child's toy, before suddenly jumping up as if he was born with wings. completely energized, completely altered.
So this detail serves a dual purpose. It explains why dragon blood is so revered and also demonstrates the fundamental, overwhelming biological power disparity.
Right. For dragon, it's ceremonial wine. For a human, it's a potent, transformative chemical agent that borders on the magical.
But it's also used pragmatically.
It is. The coffer's human supporters, like Gundar's father, Gunfer, even knew how to manage small doses, mixing dragon blood with gruel for the long, brutal winters on the Isle of Ice. It turned Gundar from a sickly child into a healthy little hellion.
So they're leveraging dragon biology for survival. But the copper draws a very clear line in the sand. Based on his cultural disgust, he is absolutely strict about the ultimate taboo.
Harvesting dragon parts for profit or magic. This is a matter of profound moral and political conviction for him. He viewed the idea of collecting bones, teeth, hearts, and sinews for hominid medicine or magic as fundamentally ghoulish.
Ghoulish, that's a strong word.
It crosses the line from alliance and tribute into desecration and commodification of their species.
And he was even challenged on this internally by the ever-cunning Ankaline clan, who saw an immense untapped revenue stream.
Exactly. An Ankaline named Kuramam approached the copper with a cold, calculated financial analysis. Kuramam had done the math, calculating what a year's worth of dead dragons would be worth to the Imperial Treasury if those parts were properly harvested and sold.
And what was the sum?
Staggering. But Copper's reaction was immediate and decisive. He did his best to forget the sum and gave the calculating slinker a fuller appreciation for his tear's disapproval, with hard words and hard pokes at his tail tip.
The copper wants alliance. He wants tribute, but he forbids the monetization of draconic death. This boundary is crucial because it defines his ultimate moral limit.
A limit which, as we'll see, his rivals do not share.
And that's the perfect segue into the intrigue at court. The stability of the Lavadome rested heavily on the succession. The wingless Queen of Worlds, Nilrasha, was disabled due to a dreadful crash at the Battle of Hypat,
which rendered her unable to perform her duties as the active political consort. A massive leadership vacuum.
So to solve this, she makes a strategic, genius move by appointing Wistala, the Copper's sister, as Queen-Consort. Why Wistala?
Nilrasha understood the deep, paralyzing factionalism of the Lavadome. Wistala was seen as an outsider, not completely tied to the Scottle, Wire, or Ankaline factions.
And she had experience in the upper world.
Tremendous practical experience dealing with its volatile politics. Nilrasha needed a unifying, experienced hand to prevent the internal jealousies from tearing the court apart.
But Wistala's new high status came with a chilling existential mandate, a secret mission.
Nilrasha had a primal fear. She felt, intuitively, that there was a massive plot underway against the Copper's life.
So what was Wistala's secret duty?
It wasn't necessarily to expose or stop the plot immediately. Her instructions were to act like water or the wind, to follow the path of least resistance to the bottom of the conspiracy, figure out who the players were, and then make an impossible choice.
Which was?
Either save the Copper, or if the plot was too deep and powerful, decide whether joining the plot was her only viable path to survival for herself and her remaining family.
That turns Wistala from a diplomat into a high-stakes internal spy. And of course, in a society consumed by intrigue, intelligence gathering is paramount.
And we see two distinct levels of espionage employed, starting with the Copper's relatively amateur yet disturbing methods.
Which were?
He preferred to rely on giant, blood-fed monitor bats. These were massive dog-sized creatures, descendants of those who had been dining on his blood for generations.
He called it catching up on news.
He did, an attempt to distance himself from the distasteful reality of spying on his own dragons. He trusted them only because their weakness, their overpowering lust for dragon blood, made them predictable and controllable. They were glorified flying informants.
So he uses dependency as his security measure. Now contrast that with the method of the true conspirators, the Protectors of NiVom and Imfamnia.
Their methods were exponentially more sinister and calculated. They're actively engaged in biological engineering, breeding gargoyles.
Gargoyles.
Not the monitor bats sustained by bloodlust. These were engineered, furless, spiny bat creatures, described as ugly, with evilly smiling jaws and wide red eyes.
And bred for a purpose.
Specifically for military and intelligence purposes, showing a chilling, ruthless, and highly secretive approach to biological espionage that far outstripped the Copper's relatively simple blood-fed network.
So NiVom and Imfamnia are not just seeking political power. They are fundamentally reshaping the draconic world through genetics and terror.
Pretty much. And that sets the stage perfectly for the re-entry of the third sibling, Auron the Grey.
He is the ultimate contrast to the Lavadome's political morass, representing the ideal of complete isolation that the Copper rejected.
Auron had retreated to a self-imposed exile on the Isle of Ice, enjoying a simple, scaled-back life, often conversing with wolves and actively avoiding the mad hatreds and pointless conflicts of the upper world.
He was deeply suspicious of his brother's empire.
His cursed dragon empire, as he called it. That was his driving force.
His return isn't driven by ambition, but by family loyalty and friendship. Wistala calls him back to prevent a war.
She did. She needed him to accept the protectorate of Daris. Daris was ruled by Auron's old human friend, King Naf. The Grand Alliance had been threatening war because Naf had summarily kicked out his former protector.
And Wistala knew Auron's bond with Naf was the only thing that could stop it.
Exactly. Auron, the isolationist, is dragged back into the heart of politics purely to protect a single isolated friend.
And immediately he is forced to rub shoulders with the two dragons who embody everything he despises about the Empire. The Gios Protectors, NiVom and Imfamnia.
And Gios is their lavish, gaudy base of operations. It's an empire built entirely on vanity and constant rebuilding efforts, funded by trade that ruthlessly bypasses Daris, which is now impoverished.
Run by whipped thralls.
Right. And NiVom and Imfamnia are masters of deception, feigning friendship, and immediately trying to enlist Auron, celebrating his appointment as protector of their neighboring state while secretly undermining him.
The tension comes to a head during the mandated imperial feast in Daris. Auron, knowing his brother loves to flaunt power, tries to strategically sabotage the event.
He deliberately chooses a dismal, poor location for the feast, bringing the dragons down to a rustic hill country location near simple folk. His goal was to force the imperial dragons to confront the evidence, through their eyes and noses, that Daris was just poor country.
Hoping to discourage future visits.
Exactly, to protect King Naf from further political interference.
But the Gios Protectors, NiVom and Imfamnia, use the feast not to engage in simple politics, but to make a profound, grotesque moral statement. This happens during the dessert course.
This moment is absolutely central to Auron's moral disillusionment. Imfamnia presents a dish that shocks Auron to his core. Brandied hominid brains served in a rich, buttery sauce.
And Auron is so horrified he initially assumes they must be cattle brains.
He does, which is a common delicacy.
Mm-hmm.
But Imfamnia's casual correction reveals the true, calculated depth of their ruthlessness.
What does she say?
She laughs at the suggestion of cattle brain, saying, "Cattle brains, that's thrall feed, those are hominid brains." She goes on to explain, with sickening vanity, that they are sourced primarily from executed criminals in Gios.
Oh, God.
Supplemented by blighters, raided by their border soldiers simply to fill the supply order.
This isn't just dark humor or a gross appetite. It's an act of spectacular, casual cruelty designed to intimidate and to establish a moral boundary.
Completely. Auron is described as looking like he might faint. It's a moment that proves these conspirators have crossed the line far beyond the Copper's taboo against harvesting parts.
The Copper forbade profiting from a dragon's death.
And NiVom and Imfamnia are actively profiting from hominid death and cannibalism, leveraging it as a statement of power and disregard for the Grand Alliance's supposed morality. For Auron, the moral line is utterly erased here. He understands immediately that these dragons are not merely political rivals. They are monsters capable of anything.
And while Auron is processing this moral horror, NiVom reveals the true intellectual core of their plotting.
He does. He moves the conversation from gruesome political theater to ancient supernatural ambition. NiVom shares his obsessive research into the ancient crystal artifacts, specifically the Sun Shard, which was stolen from the library of Nuanced, and a smaller third crystal.
And he reveals his belief that the entire Lavadome structure functions not just as a defensive fortress or a seat of government,
but as an engine of immense power.
He connects this mysterious engine back to the founding myths, speculating it dates back to the mythical wizard Anklemere. What is his specific analogy for how the crystals relate to the Lavadome's power?
NiVom sees the system as a sentient biological entity. He compares the vast muscular structures of the Lavadome itself to the muscular meat of the system, the massive Sun Shard to the pumping heart, and the smaller third crystal to the calculating mind.
So he believes these crystals are the absolute keys to controlling the engine's deepest, most ancient power source.
Which confirms that NiVom's plot is not merely a bid for the throne, it is a bid for transcendent foundational control over the entire draconic structure, effectively making him the master of time and power itself.
This is a huge revelation. Auron, armed with this moral and structural information, immediately flies straight back to the Lavadome.
He flies 2 straight days, exhausted, and tells the copper everything.
Your protectors in Infamnia, and NiVom, I'm sure they're plotting against you. They're breeding creatures. You've heard them speak of a change, a new tier being put in.
But this warning unfortunately arrives too late. We move now into the chaotic culmination. Part 4, the coup, the defense, and the fall of the tier.
The internal plot explodes simultaneously with a devastating external threat. The timing was catastrophic, or perhaps expertly coordinated. While the internal conspiracy was being triggered, the Lavadome was hit by a massive, complicated attack launched by the Wheel of Fire dwarfs. They had traveled underground through the Northflow seeking revenge, specifically targeting Wistala for her role in the death of their King Fangbreaker years ago. And this was not a simple smash and grab. The sources describe it as a 3-dimensional assault involving tunnels, the river ring, and aerial elements.
It demanded immediate and expert military command, which fell entirely to Wistala. She was thrust into command as the Queen-Consort, shaken awake, still tangled in the curtains of the Tears Chamber. But she didn't hesitate.
Her leadership in that moment was decisive and entirely focused on unifying the fractured dragon society. How did she force the clan factions to work together?
She ordered the factions to immediately evacuate their individual clan hills and converge at the central Imperial Rock. She was ruthless in her pragmatism. She specifically forced the fat, complacent dragons, those who had grown lazy in the safety of the Lavadome, to fight for the first time in generations.
She told leaders like Ladabar and Ankeline to arm your thralls and make your own flame,
essentially demanding self-sufficiency and cooperation across clan lines.
And to inspire these reluctant fighters, she took a monumental symbolic risk that also served a very practical purpose.
She donned the massive, historic dragon armor of Tir Fahazethant. This armor was built for an enormous, heavier male dragon. It physically slowed her flight and made her feel like she was a prisoner inside it.
But she wore it because it carried the weight of history and symbolized courage to the watching dragons.
Right, representing a leader who can't fly away when he's wearing this.
It was a massive psychological boost, but did it actually save her life?
It proved immediately vital. The dwarfs were using highly specialized sulfur bolts designed to pierce scale. Wistala flew straight into the thick of the fighting, leading the Demon Legion to turn the tide against the dwarfs who had already broken through the crucial river ring defenses.
And she was hit.
Multiple times. The bolts holed her wings and left her chest armor grinding into her scale, but the sheer density of the historic armor prevented the bolts from grinding deep into her body. It absorbed the primary force of the impact. The armor saved her life and allowed her to secure the Imperial Rock.
While Wistala was physically defending the Empire, the political coup was being executed simultaneously within the Imperial Rock.
NiVom used the chaos Wistala was fighting to contain as his moment to strike. He walked directly into the throne room, found the copper, AuRon, and Wistala present, and immediately initiated the coup.
He didn't waste time on formal accusations of treason?
No, he simply declared the copper medically unfit to rule, pointing contemptuously to his torn wing, his physical limp, and his stupid expression, brought on by the exhaustion and the pain he had weaponized.
And crucially, NiVom didn't claim the throne for himself. What was his immediate play for power consolidation?
He bypassed any claim for himself, recognizing that an immediate self-appointment would inspire a civil war among the clans. Instead, he installed the twin hashlings, Sahazethant and Regalia, as the new puppeteers,
which allowed NiVom to consolidate effective power for himself in the upper world under the guise of regency.
Exactly. He was merely managing the affairs for the young, impressionable new rulers.
This is where we see the ultimate definition of loyalty emerge. AuRon, the cynic who had resisted his brother's politics for centuries, and Wistala, who had feared the plot, immediately stand by the deposed Tir.
AuRon ambled over to stand beside his sister, firmly behind the copper, who was already stripped of his name and mockingly called Batty by the conspirators. AuRon simply said, "I'm with you, my Tir."
That moment speaks volumes. It shows that personal loyalty and familial bond transcended all political grievances and cynicism the moment RuGaard was truly vulnerable.
It did. But the fallout was swift and devastating, transforming the coup into a forced exile. NiVom banished the copper and AuRon, demanding they leave the Empire and seek refuge on the other side of the world.
But his cruelty was strategic. He kept Nilrasha, the wingless queen, in her eyrie above the Imperial Rock as leverage,
openly threatening to throw her from the heights if they ever returned.
Pure psychological warfare, forcing the copper to choose his exile to save the life of his mate.
And the copper tried to make a final desperate bargain, offering to live quietly in Nilrash's eyrie, promising to renounce all power. But NiVom rejected even that small request. NiVom wanted the copper to suffer cold memories, in hiding, as I did. He wanted the former tier to be a constant growing memory of failure and banishment, ensuring he never became a threat that could be rallied around.
And the final brutal blow came when the exiled group flew west back to AuRon's former sanctuary, the Isle of Ice.
They arrived expecting a refuge, only to find Imfamnia already there. She had immediately seized control, declaring herself the new protector of the Isle of Ice and announcing that AuRon had broken the bargain by returning, even though his return was part of the exile.
The family was now completely and definitively cut off from all former territory and political influence,
Forcing them to seek refuge far to the east, in truly unknown lands.
This crushing moment of loss is what triggers AuRon's reflection, which is arguably the deepest thematic observation of the entire saga. He compares his isolated vision of safety to the copper's flawed, grand vision.
He realizes that the copper, RuGaard, despite all his ruthless political maneuvering, his ambition, and his ultimate downfall, had gained them a safe refuge, hard for men and elves and dwarfs to find, and even harder to attempt to control.
He had made it a world where dragons were no longer hunted.
While AuRon, the pure isolationist, had only ever provided a single, isolated, temporary refuge for himself.
That makes the copper's failure profoundly tragic. He aimed for safety for the entire species, a stable, grand civilization, and achieved it for a generation, only to lose it all to internal rot.
And AuRon aimed only for simple isolation and found his single refuge immediately seized by his enemy. It reveals that grand ambition, even if corrupted by cynicism, can achieve more for the greater good than pure, uncompromised self-interest. The price for that scale, however, is grander destruction.
So exiled, stripped of power, and wounded, the small, loyal family unit flies far to the east, seeking shelter in the Sotavale, home of the ancient, formidable white dragon Scabia. This begins the final movement of their immediate survival story, Part 5.
And Scabia is a figure of immense age and power, and her charity is far from free. When they request refuge, she demands a staggering price rooted in her own family's needs and dynastic survival.
What was the ultimate sacrifice demanded of Wistala?
Scabia's barren daughter, Ethlethia, required eggs. Scabia demanded that Wistala, the Queen-Consort and the diplomatic power of the family, mate with a simple, unremarkable dragon named Nastarath to provide them.
So the exchange for refuge was, Wistala, the proud, powerful sister of the Tar, was reduced to a broodmare.
Forced to accept this bitter bargain to ensure the survival of her brothers and their small band of loyalists.
It is a moment of massive personal sacrifice, the Queen-Consort trading her dignity for her family's life. But the sources managed to inject a moment of unexpected hope and levity into this dark situation.
This is one of the most remarkable moments in the entire narrative structure, a brilliant twist of fate that provides emotional release. As Wistala takes off on the ceremonial mating flight with Nastarath, Darcy, the strike dragon she loves, suddenly intervenes.
He drops down out of the sky.
Interrupts the ceremony, and in a moment of pure relief and humor, that must have shocked everyone.
What does Darcy reveal?
He reveals the whole elaborate mating setup is a joke being played on Scabia by her own kin. Darcy promises Wistala publicly and definitively that he will sire the eggs himself, giving her a choice and restoring her agency.
It breaks the heavy tension.
Completely. Restoring a moment of genuine hope, laughter, and romance in the absolute nadir of their tragedy and exile.
It's a necessary pause, a reminder that personal agency and love still exist before the final, terrible confirmation of the Empire's fate.
Yes, because that hope is immediately overshadowed by the devastating news. While Wistala and Darcy are out hunting, dealing with a local threat of grotesque, horrifying trolls.
Purplish, veined monsters.
Right, they find a critical messenger. The downed, severely injured firemaid, Iafia, the daughter of Video, who was Wistala's former commander in the Firemaids. She had flown a truly immense distance to escape and provide a warning.
And what was the warning?
Iafia confirms that the Empire has not merely been seized, it has disintegrated. She confirms that the Empire is now locked in a full-blown civil war, a catastrophic failure of the entire power structure.
And the nature of that civil war proves just how deep the internal rot had gone, beyond just NiVom's power grab.
It confirms the worst fears. The war involves Scuttle clan members killing War clan members. It involves highly skilled assassin hominids killing protectors in their own resorts. The Grand Alliance is dead, Acacia is in chaos, and the dragons are tearing themselves apart based on ancient clan lines and NiVom's manipulations.
Which proves that Nilirash's initial primal fears of a deep internal plot were right all along.
Exactly. The very forces the Copper try to unify clans and hominid alliances were the tools of the Empire's destruction.
What a monumental cyclical journey. We started with the calculated rule of the Copper, who tried to balance alliances and internal power, and we ended in a total, chaotic civil war engineered by NiVom and Imfamnia.
The synthesis here is profound. The personal ambitions of a few, the grotesque desire for the throne, and the technical obsession with the ancient mysteries of the Lavadome's engine and crystals that NiVom sought to control, fueled a power struggle that immediately consumed everything the Copper had built.
The scale of the war against the pirates was nothing compared to the scale of this internal collapse.
Nothing. The Copper's grand vision of an ordered, secure world for dragons has failed. That attempt to create a unified draconic civilization built on overwhelming power and intricate planning has now led only to a war that will almost certainly leave the number of dragons even fewer.
And Wistala's sacrifice, her bitter bargain which turned into a moment of pure, redemptive love with Darcy.
It ensures only the survival of her immediate family line. But the deeper consequence is clear. The devastating costs of dragon ambition, combined with the structural fragility of relying on hominid alliances, have been brutally laid bare for the entire world to see.
The entire narrative forces us to confront this question about the nature of security. The Copper system, the Grand Alliance, leveraging hominid resources and political power, was intended to secure the Dragon Empire. But our sources prove that this very system created the pathways for his downfall.
Because it empowered the very dragons, like NiVom, who could seize control of those complex structures.
So, if a society built on overwhelming, scaled power and intricate political planning can collapse so quickly under the weight of its own internal rivalries and its reliance on the technical know-how of subordinates, where does true security for dragonkind lie?
Does it confirm AuRon's original cynical vision? Complete, scaleless isolation from the political and commercial affairs of the upper world?
The knowledge of the world is indeed crucial, as Wistala and AuRon prove. But the attempt to control that knowledge, and the power derived from it, whether military, political, or crystalline, is ultimately what makes the creation of a grand civilization so incredibly dangerous. Perhaps the grand scale always guarantees grand destruction.
It leaves us with the unsettling thought that perhaps the best defense for dragonkind wasn't the aerial host in the Imperial Rock, but simply silence and obscurity, a profound and fiery thought to end our deep dive into the treacherous politics of the Dragon Empire.
Thank you for guiding us through these perilous skies.